Aloha, everyone, and welcome. This is the NWMAF, and we are here. We're going to be doing E&I training on anti-racism, and we are very lucky to have Robynn here with us. Robynn, would you like to introduce yourself and take it away?
Yes. Hi, I'm Robynn Murray. I use she, they pronouns. I'm out of Buffalo, New York. I am an ESD instructor, and I'm going to be talking to everybody about anti-racism and how to start the path to being a better ally. All right. Whew, here we go. Anti-racist, the path to becoming an effective ally. Now, I put in an overview because I don't want you all to think I'm going to info dump on you before we get into everything. So I wanted to create an outline to show specifically why the things I'm talking about lead up into allyship. So we'd be going over what is racism, racism as unconscious bias and participation in a system of oppression versus individual choice, white supremacy, whiteness, and white privilege, white fragility and individual accountability, the process of change. It starts with you. Well, it starts with us, and resources and recommendations. So the dictionary definition says that racism is a belief that by nature certain races of people are inherently superior to others, or it's a hatred or discrimination against a person or persons based on their race. The updated scholarly definition that I took from Dr. Robin DiAngelo, she's the author of the books White Fragility and Nice Racism, is that racism is collective racial bias backed by legal authority and institutional control. So coming to white supremacy and whiteness. Before we start with any of the information, I want us all to take a couple minutes and think of what picture comes to your mind when you think of acts of white supremacy or racism. And do you think that that vision is harmful or helpful to the overall conversation about race and privilege? I'm going to take a couple minutes and then check in with everyone, because I'm not going to spend all of this time talking at you. I'd like it to be a dialogue. So I'll time 2 minutes and then we can all get back to each other. Anybody want to share their thoughts?
I can jump in.
Okay.
Sure. So what came to mind for me were kind of oppositions, like big and small, and overt and covert, and systemic and personal or interpersonal. And I think the big ones are like, oh, there's the guy in the white suit, and oh, there's the person who can't get into the place, and that's also systemic. And I think in terms of does it help or not, I think that the big helps at first, because it's recognizable. But I think that for me, at a certain point, it's no longer useful because it's known. It's known and it's easy. And it's the small and the interpersonal and the covert that's actually trickier to suss out, but way more important to me. So that's what I came up with.
I love that answer. I love that answer. I didn't really know how to prepare for this because I'm used to kind of teaching groups of people that are not focused toward social justice in any way whatsoever. So I kind of have everything from the ground up, but just to cover my bases. Anybody else? Amy?
So what came to mind as I was thinking about it, I don't know if this is exactly a response to the question, but it's related, is I know that I, as a white person, have to work harder to be trustworthy, and that I can't assume that people of color are going to trust me at all. And, that's as it should be. Like, white people have not shown themselves to be trustworthy historically, and someone who doesn't know me doesn't know that, I'm very well-meaning, and so I think that it's on me to be not only well-meaning, but to be constantly vigilant about the ways that I can err or, not be the ally that I want to be, because that is the way what the world has given us.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, like, nobody's answer is going to be wrong, right? Nobody's answer is going to be wrong, and we're kind of more into like white supremacy and whiteness, because it is insidious. Everything that we're exposed to, the way our country was founded, shapes our idea of race and how we interact with people. And just becoming aware of our own race and privilege is like the beginning. It's a practice. All right, I'm gonna go back to my slideshow because I learned how.
We have Koti who
Oh,
has.
I didn't see you.
Oh, no problem. I was just going to share that what came to mind. I was recently reading this article about just how on the borders, how two languages, English and Spanish, have merged, and there's like these new phrases that are used, and just it's really beautiful how these new words are kind of it's a mix, right? And I believe this happens at every border when there's two languages that meet. But the reason it came to mind in this class is just remembering growing up on a border and how dismissive the dominant culture was of speech. Like, oh, well, you're not speaking like proper English, and how that changes your view of maybe the education level the person's speaking or the intelligence level. And I think that just kind of is relevant to this topic of how we can pass it off as, oh, well, they don't know proper English, as opposed to this is actually racist.
Yeah. Tasha?
Yeah, so I was just thinking about some different experiences that happened recently, and have some friends who live in different areas of the South, and having conversations. One made the comment about how like Asian people are really hanging on to this wearing a mask thing. And I was just like, oh, so it's just these little tiny things that people say on a day-to-day basis that it's not even a thought. There isn't this questioning of themselves. It was just like right into the new conversation that she went. And I had to sit with myself for a little bit before bringing it up. That I think about the teacher who said the N-word and thought it was justified because there was an A at the end. So just these little tiny things that are actually really big that happen on a day-to-day basis, that can happen in somebody's classroom, in a school, and kids are seeing it on every single day, and they have to address it. They have to address an authority figure and challenge it, because that's how that authority figure was brought up. So a lot of the education that I see more youth taking on an active process of being knowledgeable in equity and race and racial justice. And I think that for older generations, my generation included, it's more of this challenge to, all right, let's step up to the plate, let's do this. And for the people that are doing that, I think that it's amazing. I also am, it's not that I'm less concerned about the people who are stepping up to the plate and doing it. I'm concerned about the people who aren't thinking of it at all, if that makes any sense.
It does. Let's see. Did we get everybody? All right. Let me go back. It's a process. Zoom, share. There we go. All right. So getting into white supremacy specifically, we all seem to have a good idea of what it is, but it's defined as the belief that white people constitute a superior race, should therefore dominate society, typically to the exclusion or detriment of other racial or ethnic groups. This is not always a conscious thought, but learned behavior that is reinforced by social norms. And I added a link in the resources section to the Harvard implicit bias study. It's incredibly eye-opening, and I would encourage everybody to take it. I would like to add that BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color, can be racially biased, but not racist. BIPOC people lack the level of socio-political capital that is necessary to affect change on widespread legal, social, or institutional level. While it's possible for organizations that are majority people of color to discriminate on the grounds of race or ethnicity, they lack the overall ability to enact societal changes. And just like Anita was talking about, when racism is talked about by and large, it's referring to interpersonal racism. And this is the easiest to address or fix because it addresses behavior only. This is easier for white people for address since we don't stand to lose anything tangible in the process. It doesn't challenge or change any systems of oppression. Whereas institutional racism or structural racism are so ingrained in our society that even to begin to question making any changes to the status quo provokes violent protest and shouts of reverse racism. For example, the All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter voices pulling focus specifically from the Black Lives Matter movement, or the current temper tantrum from right-wing politicians attempting to create laws to stop or even ban the teaching of critical race theory or even Black history in schools because it, quote, villainizes white people and teaches white children to feel bad about themselves. Not only that, but there are grown white men having freakouts about a young Black girl playing Ariel the Little Mermaid, which I never thought in my life I would see. Why am I talking about white supremacy and history in a workshop about being a good ally? To show it shapes everything we've ever been taught. We live in a country that was literally built by slave labor on land that was stolen from murdered or displaced indigenous people. And we have to decolonize our own minds. Whiteness and white racialized identity refer to the way that white people, their culture, our culture, customs and beliefs operate as the standard by which all other groups are compared. This has created a culture where non-white persons are seen as inferior, other, or abnormal, thus reinforcing white supremacy. Whiteness also operates as a social mechanism that grants advantages to white people since they can navigate society both by feeling normal and being perceived as normal. This serves as a basis for white privilege. What are ways in which whiteness is normalized in our everyday lives? So we'll come back to having a discussion for a few minutes. Anybody?
Well, English whiteness is definitely normalized by what names are considered easy names or difficult names to pronounce, what names are considered unusual or, you know, so different.
Yeah.
I think this is changing, but what is considered flesh colored, for instance, in Band-Aids or crayons?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll name a great big one. When I look at my government, most of the people are my skin color. Even though I walk through the world as a white person, I'm perceived as a white person. I am part Latina and indigenous, but since people can't look at me and see that, and my mom's family is very like white and German, I've never had to face that sort of racial bias. At most, I get questions of people asking me, "What are you?" which is still kind of rude, but not outright people being nasty to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like one of the worst things is someone saying, "Oh, let me guess."
Yeah, yeah.
And then going into like a million things that I'm not or that other people aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that I see a lot. What was coming to mind for me is what is considered ethnic food or oriental exotic different foods, stuff like that, you know, because if you're in Brazil, it's not a exotic food.
Right.
It's just food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is real Tex-Mex? What is real Mexican food? Sorry, I'm living in Texas, so that comes up a lot. Like, it's not authentic. No.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It's one of the only things I like about Texas. Just saying.
You know, I'll chime in on, you know, how whiteness is normalized. My child is biracial, so Caucasian and Japanese, and people generally try to read them as Caucasian. So that's like, right, in an effort to normalize them, right? They don't, you know, and that comes and they get it from all over the place, like Caucasians will try to read them as Caucasian. The Asian groups will read them as Caucasian. And this is, and my child is like, I'm Japanese. Like they don't even, at this point in their life, they don't even take any of the cultures that I am from as part of their heritage. They're just like, I'm Japanese. So, but I think of that, like that's a normalizing process that people are trying to do to them. So.
I feel like that's, just also, I have a niece who's multiracial, and one of her parents considers themselves white, even though they are from a Latin descent. And so for her, my niece, she's like, no, I'm a person of color. Like, can you not see, just by looking at me, because it got into a debate back and forth of, no, you're white. And it's like, no, you aren't, because all of the experiences that you have on a day-to-day basis, she deals with microaggressions at school and bullying at school. I know that it was a challenge for my parents because my dad was white, my mom's Native and Ukrainian, and it looks completely different. And growing up, one of the craziest things was me going to the library, where I would look and I would get so sad as this little tiny girl who just wants to find a book that looks like my parents. I was like, no, none of the couples look like you. And they were saying, no, sweetie, you just have to make a book like that. And so that's why I published a book, was just because I wanted something like that. It was really hard for me because I would get really sad because I thought, oh, but they're like the perfect couple. Why aren't there books like that? So that was really interesting to just see, as we're talking about it. That's where my mind is going, is like going into a library, and having a million books. But if you go to the children's book section, it's going to have all of these different, it's basically segregation. You have all of this, like, oh, here's the Latin section, here's the Asian section, and so kids learn at a very young age, about those differences and what is normal. Here's American children's book section, and what is not normal or what is foreign.
Yeah, quite literally black and white. Like, this is the regular history, or this is, the regular books, and then this is the Latin history, or this is the Black history, or yeah. Did I miss anybody? Can we move along? Okay. All right, Zoom doesn't want to catch up with me. Yes, entire screen. Share. I chose this quote because I really liked it, from from the author Ibram X. Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist. And it says, I may not be a producer of racist ideas, but I am a consumer. And then I listed some examples of white privilege. And I think a lot of them we touched on during our discussion, but I'm just going to go through them, and then we'll touch on some of them again. One is, I can do well in a challenging situation without being called a credit to my race. If I have interaction with police, I can be assured it's not because of my race. I can easily buy posters, greeting cards, books, dolls, toys, or other children's items featuring my race. Excuse me. I'm never put in the position of being the only representative of my race in a social or group setting. I can count on my skin color not being a factor in the assumption of my financial reliability. I can find bandages in my skin color. I've never been criticized or told my hair or cultural items are unprofessional. And what are some examples of white privilege that you can think of or have benefited from? So
It's easy for me to get a loan at a bank.
yeah, that would be. Mine is, I should say, before I got heavily tattooed, I never got followed around by security anywhere.
I don't have to be afraid if I get pulled over by the police. Which I don't have a car, so that doesn't really happen, but I don't have to automatically be afraid of police authority.
Yeah, just in general, people give me the benefit of the doubt. Like they just will wait until I say something or do something rather than forming an assumption about me beforehand.
Yeah, those are all really good examples. And like, I'm perceived differently, like as a heavily tattooed person, but that's something I did to myself. So that's slightly different. But even if I decide to wear a blazer and dress differently, I still get treated night and day from what like my best friend gets treated as a Black woman. And it's
Even in business meetings, when I was younger, I ran a nonprofit, and board members, who were white, it was this interesting thing because it was almost like they would cut off some of the board members who were board members of color. They would speak, and they would speak for long periods of time, and they would be offended when somebody would say, hey, like we're doing a 2-minute speaking thing. That was really interesting. Or, I would automatically get cut off by some of these board members when I was speaking or sharing a report or a thought or something. So it was really interesting to have those kind of experiences where it was totally fine. But if it was me cutting off that person, it would have been extremely offensive.
yeah, or like women of color being seen as like angry and aggressive when they don't want to put up with like racial abuse anymore.
Yeah, I get mistaken a lot for Latina. And so then they're like, oh, you're fiery. And I don't, I don't speak any Latin languages. I really wish I did, but
Yeah. No, me either. Some French, broken Arabic, that's about it. All right, so whiteness and its accepted normality also exists as everyday microaggressions toward people of color. Microaggressions include, but are not limited to, verbal, nonverbal, and environmental slights, snubs, or insults toward non-white people. It's been described by some as a million daily cuts. Whether intentional or not, these attitudes can communicate hostile, derogatory, or harmful messages. And I put in a link that's available to everybody. A university put together a different list of microaggressions, what the person intends to say, and then what it comes off as to the person it's being said to. And I took some examples. So microaggressions. You're so articulate. This usually means I didn't think you would be this, or you're being aggressive. This usually means the speaker is uncomfortable with assertiveness from a Black woman. I don't know why I wrote it wrong. Can I touch your hair? Or touching it without consent. This is like petting an animal. Being pet like a dog at work is deeply uncomfortable for anyone, especially so for Black women who experience it so often. Or I would add Muslim women who wear hijabs and everybody wants to mess with their scarf. Like, leave their scarves alone. Using African American vernacular English when speaking to a Black person, mispronouncing an employee's non-Anglo name after being corrected multiple times. I think Carmel touched on this. And then another one is giving someone a nickname without their permission because you're uncomfortable saying their full name. So what are some microaggressions that you've witnessed or accidentally done? And I'll start off by saying accidentally done because allyship is a journey. And even going in with all of the best intentions, you can offend somebody and go, oh man, I messed up. But how you deal with it is the most important thing. Let's see, what did I do? I'm sure I've done something. I don't know, I'm drawing a blank. But I was recently out with a group of my friends and there was some drag along that went to, like, of course, touch my friend's curly hair and then got upset when she smacked his hand out of the way. I didn't think that still happens until I saw it.
That actually happens to my child quite a lot. They have very long hair and people often comment, it's so beautiful, or and then you know, aim for it. And that, to the point where oftentimes when we're going into situations, I actually acted like a human shield. Like they'll backdraft off of me, you know, when that comment comes toward them. I physically move in front of them and they drop behind me because we know that the hand is coming out towards them. You know, so there's like this intersection of racism and ageism in a way, because they feel comfortable doing it partly because they're othering them because of their race, but also because they're a younger person and they feel like it's okay to treat the younger person as a pet as well. So I see that all the time, and it just like, you know, I'm taken aback every time. But we actually have like a way of dealing with it because it happens so often.
Mm-hmm. My niece and nephew are mixed race. Lots of mixed race. They're Japanese, Italian, Peruvian, Moroccan. They look very different from me. And when they were younger, I used to take them to the public pool at Camp Lejeune. And since I look like this and they're a lot darker than me, I would get the absolute most horrific looks from the other like people at the pool. And it was wild to me at that time. Why anybody would just go out of their way to be nasty.
What came to mind for for me, so one, what came to mind for me was actually my grandma coming to the United States from the Ukraine. And the family name was so long, it was Yuchishin, that at, what is it? It's where you get your names in New York, Staten Island. Is that what it is?
Ellis Island.
Ellis Island.
Yeah, Ellis Island.
So, Ellis Island, they just used the word, the name Yates, because it was so much easier. And so there was that. which you think about when it comes to history, how many names were probably changed because it was too hard to pronounce, or, you know, something along those lines. And they didn't actually choose to teach their children Ukrainian just because of the fact that they didn't want them to speak improper English. And from the flip side, I remember as a teenager when my brother first met my sister-in-law, she couldn't speak English very well. And I continuously corrected her because, you know, it was really frustrating when we were at family dinners and she was communicating and she would say something that was funny to her, but none of us really understood. So as this child in my head, felt like I was doing her a favor. And then to go to Brazil to realize that she knew 3 languages and I just knew 1. It was a wonderful, humbling experience.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I know that like admitting being wrong is like, especially like as progressive people or as white people, like the last thing you want to do is offend someone. So it's like, oh, what do I do? But you say you're sorry, like you eat humble pie, you go on with the day. That's pretty much all you could do.
I've actually said, oh, that was really racist. I'm sorry. Like I've just said it out loud, like, oh my God, that was really racist of me. I just say it because like you do it, you know, and you're just like, you know, and in a way, like that should be okay to say. I mean, it's not okay to be racist, but like it ought to be okay to just be able to say that, you know, put it right out there. I mean, it's so many things. You're not allowed to talk about this. You're not like, I got to just say it when I put my foot right in it. I mean, name it, you know?
I was going to say, one of my dear friends is South Asian, and, you know, I can't even come up with an example, but I know that I've like, blurted out something that later I checked in with her because I'm like, when I rewound that in my head, it didn't sound good to me. And, you know, anyway, just kind of owning it, like, are you okay with it? What happened? I just wanted to let you know that I heard how it sounded later, you know.
Oh, I definitely messed up. Oh, a girl I've trained with for years at our Christmas party, she brought her partner who was Malaysian, and I heard his name wrong, said his name wrong for the entire night, and like he was just so gracious, he never corrected me. And then at the end of the night, I realized what his name actually was. I'm like, oh my God, I'm such an, you know, and I'm such a jerk. So then the next time I saw her, I'm like, please apologize to your partner for me. Like you just, what do you do? All right, I'm gonna move on because I don't want to keep all of your time for the hour. So we'll get into like do's and don'ts. All right, come on, computer. All right, so this I wanted to share. I could have shared the entire quote, but it's Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. talking about specifically the racism of white progressives, or as he called them, white moderates. And he said, shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. Why do I mention that now? Burnout among individuals working in the greater sphere of social justice is rampant. There was a 2017 Gallup poll that was trying to get to the root of that problem. The conclusion showed that 82% of BIPOC people said that ignorance and racism from their white progressive counterparts was the most direct factor that contributed to their quitting due to frustration and a hostile work environment, which is sad. The most common reaction to being called out on racist behavior is brutal defensiveness. And this helps no one. It's not about assigning blame, shame, or guilt. It's about being given the opportunity to learn and grow from our mistakes, which doesn't always feel like it at the time. Common reactions to being called out. I took these specifically from an article by an author called Tess Martin. The name of the article was for medium.com, and it says, "So you've been called out, a white person's guide to doing better." I put a link to the article in there, so whoever wants the notes afterwards can go and read the full thing. But common reactions are, everyone knows I'm not racist. I have Black friends, or POC friends, or Indigenous friends, or whoever friends. That's not what I said, or that's not what I meant, or I'm fighting for you. Why are you being so divisive or so angry? Or I don't even see color. So, do's and don'ts. Do take the opportunity to educate yourself about racism. Do respect the opinions and lived experiences of Black and Indigenous people of color. Do reflect on yourself and become aware of your implicit bias, which I added a link specifically to the implicit bias survey as a jumping off point. Do apologize freely and openly if you are called out and take time to reflect. Do be anti-racist everywhere, publicly and privately. I don't think that's a problem with this specific group of people. Do read books or articles, watch films or television shows, or follow social media pages featuring BIPOC voices. I cannot stress this enough. One of the best ways to learn about the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color is to watch things that they made in their own voices, read books that they write, read articles from their perspective. Because I'm a white woman and I can teach you about racism all day, but until we get that perspective, it's like walking through a dark room. I can't guide everything. But do ensure that BIPOC are given voices and positions in groups or committees, especially if those groups are dealing with issues affecting BIPOC people. And do just be yourself around other racial or ethnic groups. What that means is going back to like the microaggressions, specifically when people try to talk in vernacular to Black people specifically, like call them girlfriend or call them sister. Like, as my daughter likes to remind me, I am nerdy, lame, and white, according to most of the world. And I just go through life that way. And as authentic as I am, that's the way that I'll choose to be accepted. If you go into a situation trying to be like extra nice or phony, it's not really going to do you any favors. Oh, I skipped a slide. So do not treat individual people of color as a representative for their entire race, ethnicity, or culture. So what that means is if we are in a group setting and there's only one person of color in the entire room, We do not look to them and ask them how we solve the diversity problem amongst the NWMAF. It's not on their shoulders. Do not ask people of color to do the emotional labor of teaching anti-racism. Enough said. Do not bring your own unhealed trauma into interactions. That's a big one. Do not try to touch a Black woman's hair or Muslim woman's headscarf, etc. You're all ESD instructors. You guys pretty much don't touch anyone without their consent. Do not assume the life experiences of BIPOC are similar. There are many ways of experience being Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latinx, etc. Do not participate in the Oppression Olympics. And what I mean by the Oppression Olympics specifically is I'm pretty positive, working in social justice, everyone in our chat room has been in a situation where someone's like, oh, well, you're getting discriminated against because you're this, but I'm also getting discriminated against because I'm a queer person, or because I'm non-binary, or because I'm this. And while those are all very valid, if we're having a discussion about racism, it cannot be derailed. It is, like I said, not the Olympics. It's not a race to the bottom. It is a completely different discussion. Do not assume that your good intentions cannot hurt feelings. If nothing else, if you said something to someone and they get a look on their face like they just smelled something funny, it's okay to check in with them and say, hey, like, did I offend you? Did I say something wrong? It's better to err on the side of caution. And do not go out of your way to present yourself as a good white person. Like, nobody really cares if you walk up to them and say, hey, I also do anti-racism work. They'll be like, great. What that means to me is you just focus directly in on my race instead of who I am as a person. And do not check the actions of others, like don't call out others on their racism before first checking yourself. Now I'll go back for a slide. We'll go over this at the end, but I'll show you that there was a letter written by Professor John Rabel titled How to Be the Choir. And he's someone that does anti-racism work along with Dr. Robynn D'Angelo, the author of White Fragility and Nice Racism. And they both had the same issue, that whenever they were going to talk to specifically groups of white progressives, these people would say, oh, well, you don't need to be here. You're preaching to the choir. But then when the professor or the doctor would talk to the other people of color in those situations, they would say, oh no, there's something wrong. You really need to drive these perspectives home. I also made this list a separate PDF for whoever wants it afterward. But how to be the choir. I demonstrate knowledge and awareness of racism. I continually strive to educate myself about racism and BIPOC perspectives. I am aware of my whiteness in all settings and let that awareness guide how I engage with the world. I am involved in anti-racist projects and programs. I raise issues of racism continually, both public and private. I make sure anti-racism is involved in any meetings or project planning. I avoid personalizing racial issues as they are raised in conversation. I can identify many aspects of racism as they're happening, as pretty much everyone in this group has demonstrated. We're good at that. I ensure group dynamics include the voices of BIPOC people. I have varied interpersonal relationships, both public and private, with a range of BIPOC people. Two specifically include Black people. I use my position as a white insider to share information with BIPOC people. I have developed the skills to strategically intervene in racist dynamics. I've shown that I'm accepting and comfortable with BIPOC leadership. I debrief with BIPOC people and give and get reality checks and affirmations after meetings and interactions. This is important. We'll touch back on that. I accept with no explanations or proof necessary a person of color's experience. I can be present emotionally when individuals need to express feelings of racism. I have demonstrated that I am trustworthy, and BIPOC people consistently confide in me and feel comfortable challenging me on my racist conditioning. I have shown that I am open to feedback regarding my own racist patterns. I have the skills to repair racism when I feel I have perpetrated it. I recognize my own limitations in doing anti-racism work and have set up ways to be held accountable to BIPOC people. Now, going back to this is at the heart of how we become a good ally, and specifically bring a framework into the National Women's Martial Arts Federation. How do we address someone's racist behavior in a group setting? And how do we make sure we are checking our own behavior? We'll take that discussion into the chat. Oh shit, what did I just do?
I'll jump in. I'll just jump in. So one of the things I will try to address it in a space where it's likely to be able to be received. So by that I mean I'm not gonna not address it, but you know, if something comes up and there's a whole big group of people, I'm likely to look for an opportunity to take a person aside and address it. And that doesn't mean that I might not go back to that. I will also go back to the group, but if I actually want it to be an effective interaction with a person, calling them out in front of a big group of people almost never. I'm going to say never. I don't like to, I rarely use the word never, but I'm going to say never helps. Mm-hmm. So again, moving, you know, sidebarring it, so that I can, and then, yeah, I'm more likely to do that. I'm less likely to then bring it back into a whole group. I think I'm less confident to negotiate that. For instance, in like I'm in a dojo right now that is so steeped in systemic racism. I mean, the whole structure. I mean, yeah, you know, and my child is also in that dojo, and we talk often about it. But I have not chosen to tackle that head on. in that dojo space. So, so I can say, in some ways I can say, I don't know to those two questions, because I have not, it is a very active question for me. And I'm like, I really don't know how to, not sure really how to do this. So I'll just put that out there.
Well, that's why I posed it to the group, because look, I'm one person. I'm not going to solve racism. I'm not going to be the perfect ally, but what we can do is start a dialogue about race, be honest with ourselves and each other, and try to at least come up with some solutions to like hold each other accountable, hold ourselves accountable. Like when it comes to addressing someone's racist behavior, I think what you said is a good idea. Like pulling somebody aside and being like, dude, that is not okay. And most of the time in situations, people will be like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize, I'm an idiot. And then they go apologize. I don't think by and large we have the type of organization where people will get super duper defensive. But I have seen it happen. Like I've taught similar workshops, gotten to the very end and had a white person come up to me and been like, but you don't really believe this, do you? And it's like, yeah, I do. It was a white privilege workshop specifically. But as far as like making sure I'm checking my own behavior, or making sure we have a way of like checking our behavior when talking about race, like when you're going into a meeting, when you're going into a group, I think it's a good idea to just have a friend there or somebody whose opinion you trust to like bounce your ideas off of. Be like, hey, did I like say anything crazy? Did you see me going down the rabbit hole? Or anything like that?
Yeah. I know that I feel I'm a little bit more direct with people when I'm calling out. It, you know, as an example, someone said, oh, this looks like a beautiful necklace. It looks like it's Navajo. And I was just like, oh, you know, it's definitely indigenous, but there's multiple native cultures and tribes in the United States. Why did you think it was Navajo? And then she was saying, oh, you know, it's mostly, was just thinking that it looks either Navajo or Cherokee or one of those, because those are the main two that people know about. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. Why do you think, you know, so I kept on asking questions. Yeah. Why do you think that? Why do you think that that's the one that most people know about? Because like there's people in different regions where they don't know about Cherokee people or Navajo people. They just know their tribe, and it's well known in that area. I have had kind of the reverse where someone had said, you know, don't say this, that's racist. It was the word ladies. Don't use the word ladies because that's racist. And I was like, well, thinking, well, that's, you know, it could be a gender bias, a generalization, but I don't see it as racist. And so I addressed that with the person, but it happened to be on like a major group chat. And I was just saying, oh, you know, this is really interesting because I've ran you know, a group that focuses on educating people when it comes to race and equity. And there's about, you know, close to 900 people in that group, and been doing this since 2014. And I've never had anybody come up and say that ladies is racist. I don't know if that's even a question. In fact, I asked the group if that's ever come up for them, and nobody actually said that it was. Where did you hear that? I'm curious. So, you know, just kind of coming at it from more of a questioning standpoint, as opposed to like, you're racist. My friend, Erin Jones, she wrote The Bridges to Heal Us. It's like a best-selling book on race and equity, and talked about her experience. And one of the things that she does talk about is that it isn't necessarily helpful to look at somebody and say, you're a racist, or that's racist, because then outright that there isn't the learning, there's sort of the shutdown in the brain where it's like, oh, they think I'm bad, they think I'm evil, they think I'm, instead of looking at it from an institutionalized perspective of, this is so ingrained in me that this is what came up, why did it happen? So I always try and come at it from more of a questioning standpoint to let them kind of think about it, and maybe they can come to their own conclusion that might be something you don't want to say. Yeah, that's my thought.
No,
Amy.
I really do like that. It gives the opportunity for growth, right? Which is the entire thing. And like the questioning, I do like that. I like it a lot.
Think also talking about your own experience, like, this is making me feel really uncomfortable, rather than trying to speak for someone else, or, take, whatever, take something, like, assume that someone else is having a particular experience, saying, when I hear that, that makes me feel really uncomfortable, because it feels, if you can avoid using the R word, it feels racist, but it feels, really dismissive of this person, and that doesn't feel good to me. So can we take a step back and do something differently? Something like that. I don't know.
But I have a question about that. So we've learned about white supremacy, and then like technically all of us are racist because of racial bias. So is there a difference between telling somebody don't say that because it is racist, or you are a racist? Like,
Mhm.
is there a difference
It's
in the way that we're saying things? Like,
it's
X
behavior
is
versus
not
identity, right?
okay because of Y and Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I do think that like avoiding labeling another person, and looking, I love the questioning process. I love that, because sometimes I love it for its kindness, but I also love it because sometimes it lets people hang themselves, right? Which, people will walk themselves into a corner and be faced with themselves through a questioning process like that. And I just personally, I also love the idea of sharing, hey, this makes me uncomfortable because, I mean, going further as saying, as an ally, as someone who is working to be, anti-racist, is working, it makes me uncomfortable because of these things. Again, not co-opting the experience of another person. I guess I think about it as which actions could actually promote change and which actions will shut down change. And so for me, yeah, there are people I like to be, you racist. You're just a racist, but the opportunity is gone. The opportunity for conversation is gone. Whereas that is racist. That, like, even, yeah, the R word's a big one. The R word is a big one. So yeah, I guess it's like, how can I function in conversation in a way that will promote growth, even though I sometimes would love to get up on my high horse and just read someone. So,
Read
know.
them down.
yeah,
Read them
yeah.
to Phil.
Yep. So yeah, that's just some of the things that came to mind. And so I'm taking so much away already. This is really helpful.
On the other hand, it can be a huge turning point for somebody to hear that. I did actually say this to one of my boyfriend's friends when he was talking about an election with a certain someone, and just going off about how these are all the good points about this person. And he actually got really angry. He almost tried to take a swing at me, and I just stood up ready to go. And my boyfriend like kicked him out of the house, told him like, you need to calm down and you can't be here until you do. It was a huge aha moment for him, where he had to like sit with himself, do a whole bunch of research. He came back to me like with some banana bread and wanted to sit and talk like a year later. And I was just like, I'm not mad, but I had to say something. So yeah, I mean, there are consequences if you do say it. You might have somebody who wants to punch you in the face, which can be frustrating.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like, the ways in which we deal with racism, or the ways in which racism happens, is like as varied as the different ways that we can have social interactions. You can have somebody who's a raging like jerk, or you can have someone who has microaggressions. But what specifically we need to remember, like as white people, or as white presenting allies going into spaces with people of color, that if we do get called racist, as much as that may hurt our feelings, it's not a personal indictment of us, and that our feelings on that subject, is hurt as they may be, are not more important than those of the person of color who we just hurt with whatever we just did. Dependent. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like if we do something nasty, and then a person of color, a friend, or someone on a group with us says, that was racist, you were acting racist, instead of getting mad and responding with, well, I'm not racist because I do this, and getting upset, taking some time, like reflecting, and then going back. Because as much as it hurts to be called racist, I'm sure it hurts to be on the receiving end of racism and microaggressions every single day. So it is our responsibility just to own up to that. And like I said, I mentioned white supremacy, I mentioned whiteness, and I mentioned white privilege because it's a construct. It is insidious and has informed every single part of our life. So it's not a conscious decision. We're not horrible. We're not, running down the street with tiki torches, voting for nasty people whose names I won't mention. It's just a growth opportunity. But I feel like I have taken enough of everybody's time. And I will leave you with that. I'm going to put my email in the chat so that if you want the resources or the recommendations or the implicit bias survey or the unpacking white privilege workshop, I can get those all to you.
Aloha.